and continue with the Homeowners Protection Bill, second reading and committal. As member for Fox Hill, you recognize.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Let me just first add my words of support for International Women's Day and the support of the role of women in our society. It is it is, of course, on reflection, my regret that last year the policy with regard to the role of women did not change officially in the country with the failure of the referendum. And I hope that at some point the matter in the future will be corrected. But I was reminded, Mr. Speaker, as some people made their way, as they were talking about the role of women, that there was a movie that there was a movie by Woody Allen, and there was a little boy speaking to his dad and saying to his dad, "Dad, between Mommy and Daddy, who is the boss?" And his dad replied, "That's an easy question. I'm the boss, but Mommy makes the decisions." And that is how many households know that experience, where your mother is the one who makes the decisions. And so I wish to lend my support on Women's Day. Secondly, sir, permit me to mark the death of Rene Preval, who's the former president of Haiti. And there is open for signature at the Haitian embassy today a book of condolences, which I hope to do on behalf of the government later in the day. Thirdly, I wish to express my concern for the health and welfare of Bishop Sam Green and Bishop Simeon Hall, both of whom I gather are not feeling as well as they should, and I wish them a speedy recovery. With that, Mr. Speaker, I wish to start off by saying that I support this legislation, the Homeowners Protection Bill. And since we last met here, there's a rather startling announcement which was made in the public domain, I believe last week, that the Royal Bank of Canada is closing 4 branches. Treasure Key, the branch at the International Airport, the branch in Bimini, and the branch in Spanish Wells. I immediately saw in the newspaper a response from the people of Spanish Wells about the closure and the inconvenience that that closure is going to cost the people in that community. And I can well imagine the inconvenience that it will cause. I immediately got a series of phone calls from the people in Bimini asking what in fact were they to do with the bank closing in a couple of months. And I tried myself to rationalize the decision. I'm sure that the bank has its reasons, which are no doubt related to profits and the efficiency of their operations and so on and so forth. But the fact is, I also ask myself, is a bank actually needed in a community anymore? Is a bank actually needed in a community anymore? And there's a feeling in today's dispensation that you don't need to have a human interface anymore. That all you need to do is to punch some numbers and transfer things by phone and so on and so forth. But let me tell you what the actual situation is on the ground in Bimini. To my recollection, there are only 3 places that I know of that accept credit or debit cards in Bimini. One is the Bimini Bay operation with the Hilton Hotel. The other is the Big Game operation and its hotel. And the other is Blue Water, which is owned by the Brown family. To my recollection, everywhere else in Bimini requires cash on the barrelhead. So the question is a real one for that community. Where is the cash to go and who is to receive it? Where is the cash to go and who is to receive it? It's not only a problem in Bimini. I imagine it would be a problem in Spanish Wells, because you can't just jump in a car in Spanish Wells and drive to the next bank down the road in Eleuthera or go over to Harbor Island. It requires significant travel by water to do so, and the cost of doing so, and the security of doing so. And I also imagine Treasure Key, the long distances that people will now have to travel, but perhaps there's a, I don't know, maybe Scotia Bank is in the north, I don't recall, but Treasure Key is a long way away from Marsh Harbor. And the international airport, where you have workers, and you know, one of the things we found out in this election campaign, or my election campaign, is the number of people who, when they have jobs, if the employer insists that they have to have a bank account, do not have bank accounts. Many people simply operate without them. And then, of course, the nightmare of trying to open a bank account in this country. So I've been trying to search around in my mind, answer this question: am I out of step by thinking a bank is still needed in a community? And, Mr. Speaker, I called the governor of the central bank this morning before coming to the House to ask him whether he recalled, because I certainly recall in the era of Pinling as the Prime Minister of this country, I thought that there was a compact, an informal understanding amongst the parties in this country, the banks in this country, that in exchange for the profits which they made in the central city and in this island, that whether or not they were profitable in the family islands, they provided a social service to the people in those communities. And that was what I thought was the understanding between the parties in this matter. He said he didn't recall it, but I certainly recall it from my days of interacting with the previous leaders of this country, that was what I thought was an understanding. And so if that is the case, has this compact fallen apart? Has this compact fallen apart? Where some people who live in Toronto or live in Montreal or wherever they live make the decision to close down 4 branches of a major bank. And this is the government's banker, the government's major banker, closed down 4 banks. And I don't want to overstate the case, but I can tell you that given the responses from people from these communities, the impact of the closure of these banks is devastating on these communities. And I use that word advisedly, is devastating on these communities. There is a need, Mr. Speaker, I mentioned these 4 communities: Spanish Wells, Bimini, the International Airport, Treasure Key. But there's also a need. I was surprised when I went to Bullocks Harbor a couple of times last year. There's also a need for banking services in Bullocks Harbor. Where again, it's a cash economy in the Berry Islands. The people who come there by ships pay all of their staff by cash. So you can well imagine what difficulties that presents in terms of security. Now, the credit union has been able to supply services to some extent in the Barry Islands, in Great Harbor Key and in Bullocks Harbor. But one of the requests which people in that community have is for full-fledged banking services. And I think people, by full-fledged banking services, means the ability to sit before a teller, a human person, a bank manager, and to deposit, to withdraw, to ask for loans, and to be able to have their business transactions and various services, including services toward transactions overseas. None of that is now possible in the Barry Islands, and in these communities that will lose these banking services, those things will no longer be possible. So the next question I ask myself is, and I asked, put to the governor of central bank, is someone else going to get a banking license? Because either this government is going to have to make a decision that the Bank of the Bahamas is going to have to stand in the breach in Bimini, or we're going to have to allow other Bahamians who have the aggregation of capital to get a banking license and to see if they can fill in the gap. I understand all of that, but the point is people are looking for solutions. Maybe the credit unions can help. But what is happening, Mr. Speaker, is going on now is that people are using the web shops as a mechanism for transferring cash across the country because there's no other service available. And that's not what they don't want, those operations don't want to be involved in that, and they don't want to have anything to do with that. That's not their business.
So you gave 15 minutes. 15 minutes to give. They say it's illegal. Those that they don't want to be in.
And maybe, well, they're not doing it, it's not being done with the complicity of the web shops. I'm just saying that is what exists. That's what exists.
When the man tell me put it on his web, nobody say, yo, what? Put the money here.
The other problem that is coming, Mr. Speaker, is that, as I said, maybe the Bank of the Bahamas is a solution to this in the short term. But the other problem is, this is coming, or Commonwealth Bank, but they can make their commercial decisions. I'm saying that as a public policy, since the government is the major shareholder in a bank, it may be that has to be the way to stand in the gap, the way Bahamas Air does when these airlines decide they're not going to fly to a community anymore. So the other issue, of course, is this is coming at a time, Mr. Speaker, when there are the problems of de-risking. One of the de-risking issues is anybody who is a politically exposed person can't get a bank account anywhere. I mean, I gave the story, I think at a previous time in the Parliament, where even the daughter of the former British Prime Minister couldn't get an account in London because 14-year-old girl couldn't get an account because her father was Prime Minister in the UK. That's how bad it's gotten, because you're a politically exposed person. And the United States, where anybody is a politician or former politician, has shut down all foreign people who are in that position can't have bank accounts in the United States. So you're effectively shut out from being able to participate in the international economy because you happen to run for office. It's a disgrace. It's an absolute disgrace. And then we're threatening international transactions in this country. Western Union had to drop out. I think they're probably coming back shortly. The other issue is service is deteriorating and costs are rising. You go into these banks, the lines are long out the door, the high costs, the uneven service. And the thing that gets me is they all say, oh, well, you don't need to come into the bank. You don't need to come into the bank. You can switch to debit and credit cards. Well, let me give you my experience with the so-called debit cards. Every time I leave this country, if I forget to tell the bank I'm going somewhere else,
Turn your credit card down.
yeah, I'm sitting at dinner trying to pay for a $24 meal, and the card is declined. Declined. And then you can't get them on the phone. Call them on the phone. You can't get them on the phone.
You use your credit card today.
Yes. Yeah. And then of course it's a language you can barely understand. It's a language you can barely understand. So at the same time then, as they are taking away the human face of these communities, at the same time they're taking away the human face of these communities, the service is deteriorating across the board at every bank in this country.
You forget one part, they're charging you more.
I said costs are going up.
$24 a month for service charge.
That is what communities in this country face as we bring this
Every time you put in the machine, they charge you.
this bill before the House.
I don't use them.
Now, what the central bank governor indicates is that perhaps the country has been a bit on the back foot, and I always thought this in Bimini because I thought the Royal Bank itself could have been more aggressive in Bimini in providing electronic portals for every business in Bimini to be able to avoid this issue of having to deal with cash. But the issue, of course, is whether or not there are electronic solutions to this. The problem is, it's fine to have electronic solutions, but at some point you need to have a human face. For example, in Africa, in many countries of Africa, it is possible to transfer cash using SMS technology, which means the simple text message. So that may be one solution. It may be that these non-bank money operations, maybe they can fill in the short term or long term to provide services to people. But all of this goes, and the central bank governor used a very interesting expression this morning. It says the policy of the central bank is financial inclusion. Financial inclusion. That's what they advocate for. And I'll tell you this, the central bank is in a position, because they meet on a regular basis with the banking community, to use its moral suasion, its good offices, to move policies in a particular direction. And the principle has got to be not to exclude people from the banking system, but to get more people into the formal economy, not to exclude them. And what these policies are doing, the effect of what has happened is people are being excluded from the formal economy. And when you...
Remember, you are standing on a
Point of order, Mr. Speaker.
point of order?
Yes, Mr. Speaker, I just
Member
want
for
to
12 points.
compliment what the honourable member is saying. I went to the bank yesterday, Scotia Bank on Thompson Boulevard. Mr. Speaker,
Not even close.
the Speaker, Scotia Bank on Thompson Boulevard, right? To make a deposit over $3,000, you must get it approved by a manager in the bank for them to accept your money, cash, from a business. You have to get approval. And it takes you about 15, 20 minutes to get that approval.
Thank you, honourable member. Point of information. Member for Foxhill.
So, again, the more general point I'm trying to make is that look at all of the reforms that we have tried to effect during the past 5 years to make our tax collection system more efficient and more equitable. In order for that to succeed, and for any government to succeed in that, there has to be the largest possible financial inclusion. There has to be the largest possible formal economy in the country. It's the formal economy which allows people to make their legitimate contributions to the revenue and to run the country. And everybody's got a demand. In my going around this country, I've said this at a couple of fora. There's nothing that I have seen in this country in terms of its problems that cannot be resolved by money. Everything that I see that is wrong in the country can basically be resolved by money. But if the government is going to be the one spending the money, then it has to have a formal economy on which it can call in order to have a good tax revenue base. And banks are an integral part of that. And if the banks are doing something which is contrary to that, it is not in the greater public interest. Capitalism, therefore, Mr. Speaker, has to have a conscience. And I would say to the whole financial sector and banking system, I would commend former Pope Benedict's encyclical on capitalism as a good read. And I would also quote, and he talks about capitalism with a conscience, that things should not be driven exclusively by profit. Pope Francis says this: we must recover the whole sense of gift, of gratuitousness, of solidarity. Rampant capitalism has taught the logic of profit at all costs, of giving to get, of exploitation without looking at the person, and we see the results in the crisis we are experiencing. The home is a place that teaches charity, a school of charity which instructs me to go encounter every person, not for profit, but for love. That's Pope Francis. Lester Turnquest, who was a former member of this House, got the central bank, Mr. Speaker, in his time, to stop publishing the names of persons who were losing their homes when mortgages were being foreclosed. My former colleague Philip Galanis, I'm advised, did so as well. But people don't remember, those who were born, I guess, more than 20 years ago, won't remember that there was a naming and shaming which used to take place in this country if you defaulted on your mortgage. And the bank used to hold this over your head. You don't pay for 3 months, they put your name in the newspaper. And this had become so offensive that various members of Parliament approached the central bank and they used their moral suasion to change that policy, and that does not exist today. It may be a moving target, but the point is one continues to try and make it better. So this bill, Mr. Speaker, my point here now is this bill is taking the process one step further. It is the hope that by bringing this bill in, that judges of law will be able to exercise equity when matters are brought before them in these cases. You know, you go to the bank, they say, oh, come and negotiate with me, don't worry, Of course, you talk to them until the cows come home and they do nothing. So there is a provision now, which will allow judges to intervene in certain cases. And that's why, in my view, you want to have judges who are sensitive to their jobs, not at the whims and fancies of high-priced lawyers and their rich clients, not in situations which are stacked up against the poor. And I remember in law school being taught, my very first class in law school, we were advised to go and look at how cases were decided in Britain in the UK courts and see if we could predict, based on the social class or social order of the individuals who were the litigants, which way the decision was going to go. And inevitably, the litigants in the lower socioeconomic classes always lost the cases. The system is stacked up that way.
Point of order. Member for East Grand Mahama.
Suggesting somehow that there is some bias with respect to judges and how they view cases, other than the facts that are put before them. Is he suggesting that we ought to be appointing judges based upon our perceived, or the Judicial Commission's perceived view of how these judges judge society? I mean, I think we're on a little slippery slope there, Mr. Speaker. I just wonder if you can clarify.
Thank you. Thank you, Member for
Mr. Speaker,
Foxville.
the member has seen what happens in the choice of judges in the United States. That process does not happen here. And I'm saying that people who become judges of the court must be able to exercise equity, that they must have a sensitivity to the situations in which they find themselves. They don't come with blinders on. Lord Denning says justice is not a cloistered virtue. Is not a cloistered virtue. And that means it's not shut up in a convent beyond the reach of ordinary people. That's the point I'm making. And the Progressive Liberal Party has to help. Has to help. And that's why we're trying to bring this bill. I spoke again to one of the Royal Bank of Canada's managers, because I have a house in my my area. The people about to lose their home, they come to see me. I speak to the bank. I'm sure they could have provided $500 a month given their reduced income. But the bank said, "Oh no, you got to get out." And I said, "You watch what will happen. You put these people out of their house, and you'll see the grass grow up around your neck," as my pa used to say. And then people start breaking all the windows. And sure as night follows day, that's what happens. You go around that neighborhood now today. The house, the grass up around your neck, and all the windows broken out. And so the asset means what to them now? Is valued to what? Is worth what now? The moral hazard, yeah. That's a very sophisticated expression about moral hazard. So, Mr. Speaker, the wider point I want to make with regard to supporting this bill is it's a step in the right direction to provide equity in dealing with what is a very complex problem. Banks, they want to cooperate with us, they want to lend the government money, but there's a wider obligation to remember the human element with which we're dealing in all of our dealings. And I go back to the words of the Pope about capitalism with a moral conscience, that it is not all profit, and you can't sit in your office and make a decision which in fact denudes a community of its dignity and denudes the community of its ability to function on a socially acceptable level in a modern state. That's all coming too. That's all coming. We need lots of things. But what the point I'm making in this particular intervention is we have to start with individuals who have a social conscience about their role in society. And this must infect not only the body politic, but it must also affect the wider economy and the business community. That's the point I'm making here. And that's the only reason why Parliament has been forced to move in this direction. Because statute is generally a blunt instrument that you're exercising. And you always want to leave that as a last resort, because essentially this country is a free market economy with a minimum of regulation. But regulation is imposed where people refuse to exercise their appropriate judgment in their business dealings and take advantage of their strength in relation to other parties. It begins with an understanding of us and our moral conscience as individual citizens. And, Mr. Speaker, if I may be permitted to make this one further point. I was speaking to a constituent about the role of citizens. It is no secret that my view is that a member of Parliament is a delegate. That member of Parliament is elected for 5 years in the ordinary course to speak and to make decisions on behalf of those who he represents. We're not merely ciphers where, you just tell us what to do and we come in here. But we are supposed to exercise our own individual consciousness to every decision that is made in here. But I said to citizens who criticize, why don't you all do this? Why don't you do that? And I gave the recent example where the Bahamas government made a decision with regard to adjusting the pricing point for people coming into the Bahamas to become permanent residents, which is the right thing to do. The floor is absolutely too low. We're giving people permanent residence to stay in this country for $500,000. That is absolutely too low. The cost of a work permit is $12,500 for someone who is a managing director of a bank for 1 year, and then you're giving permanent residence to someone for $10,000 because he could pay $500,000 for a house, something's wrong with that. But when the matter was decided and put to the public, who did we hear from? The only persons. What happened to the ordinary citizen? Where are the advocacy groups? No, I'm saying they're silent. They're silent. Where is Save the Bays and the high-priced QC running off to court to protect the small consumer or Bahamian citizens? Yeah, right. Who says it's a hateful place to live? Nowhere to be found. So my final point then, sir, is this, that I would urge that there is a need for some non-governmental organizations that are advocacy groups in a general sense for consumers and for their rights, and to advocate against big business, so to speak, for the rights of ordinary people. I think that that would be a good service to be provided. And the thing is, 30, 40 years ago, all of these organizations existed. Charles Fox used to have a consumer advocacy association. But all of it seems to have gone the way with the wind. I support the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I thank you.